Beth Mount has worked for 4 decades towards a vision of a world woven together with this common thread, that all of us count, and each of us can help create aspects of a beloved community, a place where the barriers between people gradually come down and where citizens make a constant effort to address difficult challenges. She is devoted to the possibility that all people, particularly those with disabilities, belong in their communities and are seen in the light of their capacities and potential. The story of Harlem's urban innovators reveals ways that the creativity, imagination, and contributions of many people are serving to revitalize community and shows how people with disabilities are part of the heart that strengthens the fabric of community for all of us. Please welcome Beth Mount.
So a group of us have been working for many years in New York City to support young people in transition from high school, to have real lives in the community, to have real jobs and to be members. And while we had gotten better at seeing people in light of their gifts and possible higher futures, we really weren't supporting people to be members. I just gotta tell you. Maybe some people got jobs, and maybe some people had some more interesting things to do. But when all is said and done, so many people were still invisible, isolated, lonely, and still completely segregated from the rest of the community, and from each other, and from a real experience of belonging. And so we decided that it was time for a change. And what we realized is that we were the ones who needed to change. And that in order to really understand and accomplish this possibility of belonging, we really needed to go into local neighborhoods. And Harlem became an obvious choice for a lot of different reasons. And yet, it was complicated from the beginning for reasons that Diamond just mentioned, that here we have a group of individuals, young people with intellectual disabilities who are not seen in terms of their highest potential. And we have a neighborhood that on the one hand has a reputation for the Harlem Renaissance and the Apollo Theater and Magic Johnson Theater, but also has a reputation for one of the highest incarceration rates in America, one of the highest high school dropout rates, and so on. So many negative images of a neighborhood that are really the result of structural violence and systems that have separated people, so many people, particularly Black and Latino young people, from their highest potential for such a long time. And so we decided that it was time for a change, and that includes the clicker working okay. And that in order for us to really support people to be members, we had to understand what wants to be born in their community. And how do we go about understanding and tuning into that and supporting people to grow in their sense of real membership and real belonging. And so we began by looking to see who we as people from a couple different agencies that have collaborated on this, who we know in common and where they live, and we made a map of where people live, and the map revealed that sure enough, other than seeing where people live, we really didn't know much about this community. And we realized that in order to do this work, we had to change. We had to see with fresh eyes. We had to see with the eyes of the heart. We had to see with the eyes that would value the highest future potential of every person, regardless of the label of the person and regardless of the label of the neighborhood. And we had to get out. And we were fortunate that Kate Buncher is one of the key members of our collective, walked out of her job as a clinical director in an agency and brought her skills of listening and cultivating relationships to the question of what wants to be born here. And members like Tisa French on the right, who had grown up in Harlem, was in a classroom, and she had to walk out of her classroom and immerse herself in the community that she really cared the most about. And people like me, I got to get over thinking I knew anything, which was not so easy, because I didn't. And we all realized as we moved deeper into this that we really didn't know anything. And as any good recovering human service workers do, we make maps. And we thought maybe if we made a really big map, we would begin to see what's really there. And if we crawled around on the floor, maybe we wouldn't ever get up again. We would discover things. And you know what's on this map when you make it really big and you crawl around? McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, Chuck E. Cheese. Still, there's no information here about real community. But fortunately, as we began to tune in, as we began to sense what mattered to people and what other people were involved in and cared about, as we began to listen to as we began to be roving listeners, as opposed to people who were coming in with their programs and agendas and answers to anything, we discovered that there was in fact a fabric, there was in fact a world. It wasn't just waiting to be born, it was already being born. And the people that we were getting to know could have a huge part in bringing the colors of their life and their wonderful energy and gifts to this world. That was almost invisible when you're looking at the community from the outside. I think of it now as a fourth space, and this is just a handful of the fabric, the social fabric that we've learned about. There's so many more associations and passionate people and things going on here, but once again, we had to discover and find ways for people to get connected. And of course, what we also grappled with every day, this doesn't go away, is in fact the hugely overwhelming impact of structural violence that segregates people for all kinds of reasons, disability, race, class, that this issue of structural violence is so deep and so hurtful and limits people's capacities and potentials on so many levels. And so fortunately, this fourth space of passionate people were there to do just exactly that, to say, no, we are going to change the pattern. We are going to do whatever we can do, wherever we are, to shift the pattern, to break the chains of limitation. This, by the way, is some of the artwork by innovators that people have been making to tell their story and to become more visible. And so we were very fortunate early on to meet young people like Intikana from Urban Word and Dr. Drum from Bambayo, who are cultural creatives. They are guardians of culture. They use hip hop and spoken word and drumming to help young people tell their story, realize who they are, connect with those to bring what's invisible visible. As Diamond said, that's the power of art. So much the power of art. It can make the invisible visible. And in Takana, I have to tell you, in Takana, people had more to say and more to express in 6 weeks with Intikana than they had with 100 years of speech therapy. I'm just saying that it was powerful. And so young people like Chris told a story using poetry and graphics and his own art. And this completely changed the way I thought about person-centered work. It was no longer something we would do in a room, but we would engage with people in the community who could connect to the deepest places in people. And one of the things that made this such an important connection is that so many of these young men had already had such vicious encounters with violence, and not from the community necessarily, but also from law enforcement. And this was a common experience. And of course, the best we could do was make space for people to talk about it and to share how really hard it was to step out of the places they'd been hurt and step into real community life. But we just kept meeting people, and we just kept asking the question, well, who are the people, and what would it take to bring people together in safe relationships and in ones that are mutually supportive? And we met people like Tony Hillary, who is the founder of Harlem Grown, and it's an organization devoted to urban farming and nutrition and empowerment of young people. And Christopher, who's one of the urban innovators, in this picture Chris is still in high school, started volunteering in the Harlem Grown Garden. And after he graduated from high school, Tony has hired him to work in the office as a photographer and as a tech guy. That was Christopher's dream. But another important element of this story is that Tony also made room for Christopher and Ray Kwan to create the first Little Free Library that had ever been put in New York City. So yes, you know, if you don't know about Little Free Libraries, they're all over America, but they didn't seem to land for various reasons in New York City. And so this was the first one that urban innovators created together with Tony and installed. And we began to connect, word got out. Let me just tell you what happened to Ray Kwan. He's a young man on the right there. Ray Kwan has also gotten a job. So we haven't let go of the chance that every person can work or will work, but we're just not making that the only thing that really matters to people. And in the process of belonging to Harlem Grown, Ray's gotten a job with a delivery company that prepares whole foods from locally sourced farmers and organic foods and distributes them around the city. And it's called Maple Delicious Food Delivery, and that's what Ray's doing. We met people like Joe Rogers from Total Equity Now. And Joe Rogers is a literacy activist. So literacy activism is a hugely important core issue in this community. 80% of the children are not reading at grade level. They're failing in math and English by the third grade. And that becomes one of the single biggest reasons that they don't graduate and other life choices are limited. And so Joe has this hearty organization that does many things, including Rock Those Reads. It's a monthly initiative where young people throughout Harlem gather and they walk through the community, reading, carrying books, distributing books, collecting books, hosting reading groups. They do all kinds of things. And Chris, who's one of the innovators, has gotten very involved as a regular in Rock Those Reads. There's so many invitations coming from Joe and from Rock Those Reads, Total Equity Now, that we can't keep up with them at this point. Chris can't keep up with them. And so one thing led to another. Word got out about the Little Free Libraries. And the Marcus Garvey Park Alliance, which is a group of people who introduced us to the world of people who are holding on to public parks. There are 4 historic parks in Harlem, and Marcus Garvey Park is one of them. They heard about the Little Free Libraries and invited innovator Patrick and his father, Ron, who is a great artist, to help create and install 2 more Little Free Libraries, which were and have been installed in Marcus Garvey Park. That's the before picture. And you know, nobody has workspace in Harlem. You literally make them on the sidewalk. There's no such thing as a wood shop. You know, you're making these out on the sidewalk. You're painting them on the spot. They start out empty. They become empty really fast. The Marcus Garvey Little Libraries in the summer, they get filled twice a day, not only by urban innovators, but by a wide number of neighbors and other people who are really committed to these little boxes. And it might seem like a small thing, but as I said, children will line up as soon as they're filled. And they are so excited to have one of these books. And as a result, innovators, along with community members, by the way, have now installed 12 little libraries throughout this 30-block area, and they've distributed as many as 20,000 books through these little boxes all over. Yeah. So yeah, let's break a pattern in whatever way we can, right? I can't tell you what this means for the innovators. I just met with the Alliance last week. They're putting another library in for adults. All of these little libraries have been for children. They're putting another library in for adults, and they came to us first. And they've got their whole alliance together. And they said, you know, you guys rock. You're the ones. We need you. We need you to help with this. But they don't just put it on us, right? It's a whole network of neighbors and people caring for and creating these together. But distributing books is not enough. And so Patrick volunteers. At the moment, he volunteers as a tutor and as a mentor in reading groups that happen at Marcus Garvey Park. This is a group of young people that are his following. They've followed him every summer. And Jamel has a reading group in a Chinchita Garden and has become a mentor and a tutor for young people in his community. We've learned about community gardens. There are 32 of them, and we've allied with many of the community gardens to work around the issue of gentrification, to show up at rallies, to write letters, to protest that developers are coming into this neighborhood and they're trying to take over these gardens, and we're working hard to prevent that. The gardens are a place where artists work, for one thing, and Jamel has become really active as a member of the Harlem Artist Collective. And not only is he a tutor, he is making t-shirts, learning from Amar, and he's involved in mural making. We discovered the world of yarn bombing. You guys know about yarn bombing? Okay, for all you people who crochet and knit, enough already sitting at your fireplace doing it. It's time to get out. These guys are yarn bombers. They make these amazing installations all over the neighborhood. Innovators have helped host the groups that come together, and it's a big deal throughout the whole community. Naomi Lawrence, one of the artists who makes those flowers, has invited innovators, Kathy James, who runs a poetry group, into her church. It's a church that's devoted as much to the block outside of it as it is to what happens inside. This is in El Barrio. This is just one of the street festivals that they hold, much like Diamond's party. Feeding people is a big deal, right? Because hunger and food justice is still at the heart of many people's lives. Poets, Jamel, Levon, Lennon, they are involved with all kinds of spoken word artists, and they like to say that they are really no longer clients of a human service. They are outlaws, poets, and soldiers, and that's how it ought to be. The women of Harlem Needle Arts exposed us to a whole world of artists who were making money in different ways, entrepreneurial artists. Deshauna's rendering of Billie Holiday, done in a graffiti class with X-Mental, sold for more money than any other piece of art at Carnegie Hall at an auction. That was interesting. Innovators started to ask the question Diamond is asking, hey, people don't have money. What else are we going to do aside from helping people have real jobs? So a small group of innovators have taken a course at the Green Worker Co-op Academy. It's a 5-month course, very rigorous course. There are 20 worker co-ops throughout the Bronx and Harlem, and innovators graduated from the course, and in doing so, they created their own business. It's a worker co-op, Revolutionary Seeds. They own it, they manage it, they make all the decisions around intellectual property, money, and so on and so forth. It is their effort to become entrepreneurs. So in closing, our journey has helped us understand that we went from really knowing almost nothing. We had to change. We had to discover a fabric that was already there, that was waiting for us to show up. And in the many ways, we brought our gifts and our resourcefulness, our passion, and our reliability People with disabilities have become really vital key members of so many of these associations. And I think that this is a question that we are asking now in every community. What does want to be born in our community? What is being born? And how might people with disabilities step in even more and be the revolutionaries of this quiet movement? And so I leave with you two of the questions Deshauna likes to ask when she is the steward of this dreaming tree. I leave this question with you. So what is it that wants to be born in your community that people will belong to, not just go to, not just show up, but really belong to in a way that they get so many invitations and they have so many relationships that they can't keep up with it, right? That's the possibility. Oh, we have to say no. We're just so busy. Yes, that's, where we want to be. And what part do every one of us want to play in the revolution? Thank you very much.